Hello again, Pastor Michael Jarbo here. Welcome to another edition of Soul Care, conversations to help renew the spirit. I'm glad you're here. Check out today's episode. Well, hello again, everyone, and welcome to another Soul Care. I am so excited today to be with an old college friend and a therapist in Shreveport, Louisiana, Amber Dent. Amber, how are you today?
I'm doing really well, Michael. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for joining us today in our conversation. Yeah. I know in the middle of a wild week, this is, for those, whether you're listening today or in weeks to come, we are on election week, a very contentious election week.
In the middle of a pandemic, mind you.
That too. Yeah.
Minor things.
Yeah, and sometimes we forget, like, that's a huge component of this with the busyness of life, and so it just is wild. What a year 2020, and Soul Care has been actually just a little glimpse, I think, of just a breath of fresh air for some folks who are just looking like, my soul is hurting and I am in need of just someone to give me just a little bit, even a tidbit of wisdom for some nourishment. And if you know, I say to church folks all the time on Sundays, if you think your nourishment is 1 hour on Sunday mornings, you are not caring for your soul properly.
It's not enough. It's not enough.
I know. So I thought this week, how better to talk to a crisis therapist.
Ta-da!
Really, we should be talking to you every week. Like, this should be the 10th Soul Care with Amber Dent. And it might be the first of many. But I do want to say thank you for your time. Can you just share a little bit about what you do and how you're connected to your practice and your craft?
Absolutely. So I am, like you said, a crisis intervention therapist. I work with the Center for Children and Families, which is a local nonprofit. All of our clients are kids that are they're in the system some way. They're all on Medicaid. They're all either DCSF, OJJ, or have been referred through schools. In some situations, we get in before they're getting to the courts, like they're on their way towards that. So, so it's a really needy population, which is, you know, when I got my degree in counseling, I went to SMU, and I remember thinking, like, sitting there being like, okay, I'm not going to be okay counseling the soccer moms and yoga pants. It's not that they don't have real issues, not that they don't need support. We all need support, right? But I just knew that my soul's work was to be with people who don't have access and to work with that whole system, right? And so part of what I do is, my teenagers or my 6-year-olds or 5-year-olds or whoever, my kids are the primary client. But part of what I do for that intervention period is really work on stabilizing that whole family unit, because kids aren't experiencing things alone, right? They have to have the support of their family, and a lot of times it's issues going on in the family that perpetuate some of the crises. So so that's a little bit of what I do, I guess. Summary,
oh my gosh. So right. And you work you're in Shreveport, Louisiana,
I am.
And you're also a mom. And
I am. I'm a mom. I have 2 fabulous boys, a 7-year-old, his name is David, and a 3-year-old who is Sam. They could not be 2 more different children. David is me made over, and is fun to parent yourself. Let's just leave it at that.
That's good.
And Sam he's my little, like, I tell everyone, he has very strong leadership potential, because he has opinions, sir. So, and then I'm obviously thankful for my fabulous husband, Johnny, who I could not do any of this without. He will be coming home at noon today so that I can jump in with teletherapy for all of those needy kids so he can take care of our biological kids. So it's lots of juggling.
Yeah, with I'm in the middle of doing teletherapy too with my
Mm-hmm.
therapist, and it's,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, woe is me. I have to do this teletherapy. I'm like, I want to be in person. I want to do.
Uh-huh.
You also got to consider the therapist. Like, thank
Mm-hmm.
you for your work you're doing, because you're the one doing the job. And when you can only do your job at just and it's still important and impactful, but
Mm-hmm.
having that physical presence sometimes is a
Oh, it's completely different ball game. Like, it took a lot of adjustment. But Jarbo, I think you're right that it being present with people matters, and the medium affects it, but it
yeah.
doesn't negate it. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that that's part of what I have to kind of anchor to a lot of times, especially in these really troublesome cases. So,
Good.
yeah.
Well, let's jump into it. All right.
Okay.
So talk to me. What is, our this is called soul care. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
just like, what can people be doing today to take care of themselves, to take
Mm-hmm.
care of their, in the midst of really so much crisis
Mm-hmm.
happening in different capacities.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you work with children in the
Mm-hmm.
midst of the system, but some of those practices I'm sure carry over for just a
Everybody.
person who is who's bouncing
Mm-hmm.
back and forth between Fox and CNN and
Yeah.
Twitter and Facebook, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to not wear a mask and make sure it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like, there's so many, someone told me, we were talking on another soul care about decision fatigue, and how it's like
Mm-hmm.
a real thing that's actually like tearing apart minds and
Mm-hmm.
hearts, because people are so rattled
Mm-hmm.
with decisions
Yeah.
everywhere they go. So
Mm-hmm.
um, in your work, what are some recommendations you might give folks who are in need of that kind of care?
Yeah, I think kind of the main, there's like a couple of main things that I've kind of rooted to in this season. And it's something that I think I root to even when we're not in the midst of a pandemic and a crisis of identity and culture and all of those things. But I think I've found myself really anchoring to it now is the fact that I think the first thing is just normalization, right? Like, knowing that it is a hard time, right? And I've been doing a lot of education with people about like how our brain works, how crises affects our brain, and how our brains are hardwired for survival. And so
Yeah.
when we are in the middle of an environment that triggers questions around our survival. Now, like, for most of us, thankfully, our basic needs are met, right? Like, we have shelter, there's not a lot of people, but I think, probably a lot of people watching us and who we interact with on a daily basis, our basic needs are met, right? And so that's one level of care that then allows us to access the next level, right? But even in, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is what I kind of talk with clients about a lot. Our brains are still struggling towards, how do I make it to the next moment, right? And so
Mhm.
when we are activated by crisis, our brains change, right? What we can access changes, right? And so it's not just oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed and why isn't this working for me? It's like, well, my brain is physically firing in ways that it doesn't normally fire. And so
Yeah.
part of what I really want to do for people is normalize, like, hey, like, cut yourself some slack, because it
Jeez.
is hard. We are in a hard time, and it is a constant state of hard time. I tell people all the time that a crisis, my crisis intervention program that we run is a 2-week period, because biologically and physiologically speaking, our bodies can only handle a 2-week crisis period. Then we go into a different kind of physiological expression of what a crisis is. And I mean, we're month 11 of 2020. So like, most of us are in that like perpetual crisis state, which does a lot of physiological damage, right? It
Yeah.
does a lot of behind the scenes stuff that we're not accounting for, because we're so good at looking at other people's outside and thinking that their inside isn't going haywire like ours is,
Oh,
you know? So
gee.
I think normalizing it is a big part that, I tell
Okay.
people, you're not broken. You're not bad because you can't figure this out. You're not,
Mm.
it's not hopeless, right? Like, it feels hard, but it feels hard because a crisis by definition is something that our typical line of coping does not work for.
Right.
Like if we had the coping skills for it, it wouldn't be a crisis, right? It would just be like a really crappy time, right? Like, but it's a crisis because we don't have the skills to attend to it, right? And so if we feel overwhelmed, if we feel these things, that's our body's way of saying, our soul's way of saying, like, I need some extra help. And that's okay. Like, and so I think looking for that extra help, knowing that it's okay to ask for that extra help, be it through therapy, be it through your pastoral counsel, be it through that best friend that you feel like they already have too much on, but like you really need to talk to them, right? You know, like just finding those places where you can normalize your experience and say, it's okay that this is hard, is the first thing I would say. And I think the other thing, like in doing that, then is also, I've been really big with clients about grounding practices. Like, what is it that brings us back to reality? Because our brains, as much as they're geared towards survival, they're also geared towards, because we are more developed, we have that prefrontal cortex that thinks through things, right? And so it's like the play of, I got to survive, but I also have to think through all the 500 steps in this, right?
Right.
And so like we overthink things sometimes too, right? I had somebody explain it to me, and I've used this like all the time now. So like our saliva glands in our mouth, their job is to produce spit. It's always producing spit, right? Like you swallow constantly throughout the day. You don't even think about it. Like your mouth is full of spit, because that's what it does. The brain's job is to produce thoughts, right? So it's constantly producing thoughts. It's constantly now those thoughts, just because they are produced, they don't belong to you. They aren't you, right? It's not necessarily something that is true because, you know, I think therefore I am. Well, sure, but it's not also like, just because you thought it doesn't mean it is, right? So sometimes it's kind of like stopping. The beauty of grounding is it stops yourself in that process and roots you back to reality. And so when I talk about grounding with clients, I'm really big about our 5 senses. I do this one exercise with clients where it really is, it's a 5 sense exercise. Like we all have our 5 senses. We all know what our 5 senses are. And it just walks, and you can do it anywhere. That's what I love about it. It's, so the first thing you do is you look at 5 things that you can see. So I'll just be like, name 5 things you can see in the room, any 5 things, right? Then what are 4 things that you can hear? And that one gets a little bit harder because like we're not as attuned to listening, right? So then what are 3 things you can smell right now in this moment? What are 2 things that you feel? What is 1 thing that you can taste? And just walking through those things, bringing yourself to the awareness to the environment around you, seeing what's going on, it brings you back to the present moment, and it gives you control in a way that you didn't have before.
No. Jeez Louise. And that might sound like ridiculous to some people, like 3 things I can smell. Like I'm thinking about that, but like sometimes it doesn't even have to be like, like I'm smelling fear.
Right. Or I told my client, I was like, does your shirt smell? Like every time I smell my shirt, I smell home. Right? Because like we all have a smell, like, you know what I mean? Like, okay, do I smell the air around? What does the air around me smell like? You know, and for me, smells are, I'm realizing part of what this pandemic is teaching me is that smells are really important for me personally as a grounding sense. Like, so I'm really big with like, I'm looking over here because I have like 4 candles. But I've gotten really big about like lighting a fruity candle in the kitchen so that when I walk into that room, there's a different smell, and it hits me and it brings me into the present moment just by the act of like engaging that sense. You know what I mean? Like it brings me back. And I have like little essential oils that I will, you know, because that's like what every basic white girl does now. But I mean, like it for me, if I can stop and really smell that,
right?
It's not so much about like, does this sense heal whatever? It's more about like, in this moment, I am a person who is safe and am engaged in my body.
Mm.
Just by smelling something. You know what I mean? Like, so, and you're right, it sounds really dumb. It sounds like
Yeah.
that can't be good enough. But Jarbo, I can tell you the difference from when I don't take the 2 or 3 seconds to light my candle, to smell my thing before I engage with another person.
Yeah.
Because I'm just not in the same space.
Yeah. I've got a pre-routine I do every Sunday morning before I preach. And there have been probably, 3 times in all the, in the 7 years I've been a preacher that I have missed that routine, and I can feel it, right? Taking the extra time to ground yourself gets you ready for whatever, whether it's a presentation or a sermon or just getting out of bed in the morning.
And I'll say, Jarbo, too, those rituals matter. They matter not just on a big sense, because like as Christians, like we're aware that those rituals matter, right? We engage in communion because it connects us, right?
Yeah.
Like we engage in the baptismal covenant and the rituals of saying those things because that's part of our identity, and they root us, right? They give us meaning. And the same is true in the little rituals that we do in our daily life. Like it doesn't have to be this huge theological thing. Like for me, another one of my grounding practices, if I start to feel overwhelmed, is I take my shoes off and I go stand in the grass in the front yard. Wow. Like really like that, even if it's just like 2 or 3 minutes, because I need feeling the grass on my feet, right? Like reminding me that I am present here now. Those little things matter, and they are rituals to our well-being. They are rituals for our soul care, and it is about, I think, being present as you can, because all of this other stuff is pulling you in other places, and that's part of the chaos, right? That's part of the overwhelmed feeling, is that I can't be in more than one place than one, and yet I feel this pull in all of these other places.
Yeah. So Amber, why then are so many people fearful of getting help? And not even like, this is probably like maybe the most asked therapist question to you, or just like, why is we've got this person on our staff. Her name's Caroline Stone. She works in our youth department, and she, in her big we have this big summer event called Work Camp, just outdoor. I mean, just kids doing incredible stuff. And she's preached last year, and it was all about the importance as youth to find counseling, therapy, and extra help in your life. And I'm just like, in my youth group, if you were going to a counselor, you were looked at as like someone who like needed help. And
you're cray-cray.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And I was always just conscious of that. Like it's so taboo, and especially from my parents. I tell, just like the idea that I go to personal therapy and couples therapy to some family members is like, are you and Leslie okay?
Are everything okay? Yeah.
Do you need to take a sabbat? Like, it's like almost like, so I'm going on too long, but I want to just ask you, like, why do you think it's so difficult for people that ask for help?
Okay, so I think there's a couple of things. One, I think you hit on it, right? It's the stigma, right? There is a stigma involved with mental health, because here's the thing. If your heart starts beating irregular, nobody's going to judge you for going to a cardiologist.
Right.
Not a single person. They're going to be like, hey, dude, go to your cardiologist. And if you wait too long, they're going to be like, what are you doing? Right? Like, take care of your body, right? So, but that's partially because we are okay with cardiologists, right? We are okay with that, what that means. Nobody thinks you're broken for going to the cardiologist because your heart is beating too fast, right? But yet we think that if you have mental health issues, that those are somehow less than, or you are crazy or you just can't handle it. So part of it is the stigma. I do believe that the stigma is getting a little bit better, but I
Yeah.
do and as access becomes more available, that's another thing, right? Because it is kind of a privileged thing for some people, right? And so that sets a whole nother level of access and beliefs around what goes on there. I think too, Jarbo, for people of faith, we as believers have done a really disservice to actual soul, mental, body care, right? Like we are really good at fractioning things off, right? And saying like, okay, well, if you have this sin issue or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, then that's a matter of your heart and your soul, right? And we don't look at the whole being as I think God intended us to be. And that's we are created in God's image, right? And we are these magnificent beings that aren't just one part, right? And our culture, I think our faith a lot of times highlights our deficiencies. And I don't think it's in a malicious way sometimes. I think it's in a like, know these things so you can do better, right? Like, but then we don't give the avenue to say, God loves you and wants you to be good. God saw that it was good and called it good, right? And so God wants you to be good. Like, and not just good in a moral sense, but good in a whole collective sense. And so I think a lot of times it's hard, especially for people of faith, because we don't look at it as a part of our spiritual practice. We look at it as something that says, okay, well, this is this other part of me, right? And really, like for me, if my mental health is not okay, not only am I not a good mom or a good therapist, but I'm not a good person of faith, right? I'm not open to what the Holy Spirit is telling me. I'm not able to hear or be grounded or listen to where God may be speaking to me, right? Because I'm not in tune with that. And that is, it's connected. And so I think that a lot of times we lose that connectivity, or we try to feed it in other ways. You know what I mean? Like we try to
shortcut.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I think, and the last thing that I would say, honestly, Dermot, like change is hard.
Yeah.
It's just hard. It's scary. Different is scary. And I tell people all the time, one of the things that I do with clients is I go through like our informed, like the very first session, I'm going through all the paperwork, blah, blah, blah. First thing I talk about is like where limits of confidentiality is. But then the next part of that form that I talk about is I need you to know that when you come to counseling, a lot of times you come to counseling because you want things to be better, right? And that's what I want for you too. But a lot of times it's going to get harder before it gets better, because I'm asking you to do some hard stuff, right?
Yeah. So
and I have very vivid memories, especially when I first started practicing, of clients who left because it got too hard. And I struggle with that because it was like, well, what did I do wrong? But really, the truth of the matter is, it is hard to change even when you want to, right? Like how many of us have like said we're going to lose 20 pounds and I'm still holding on to those 20 pounds? Because change is hard. And it's not something that and mental health change is even harder because it's this, so many times it's unseen, right? So many times it's just the automatic reflex. So it's hard. We don't like hard things. I don't like hard things. You know what I mean? Like it's hard and it's scary.
But so is faith. So is and so it's just you use the phrase spiritual practice, which is just like, it's like this like unicorn sometimes because it's like so rare when you have a little chance and you're doing it, it's like awesome. But we cannot make spiritual practices and self-care, we can't treat it like a unicorn.
It's not a band-aid, right? Like it is the hard work of looking at the wound and cleaning it out and hurting while you clean it out, right? Like if you have a deep cut and you're cleaning it out and you're pouring that not neosporin, that hydrogen peroxide or whatever in it, it hurts, right? Like, but it's for its own good, and it feels better later. You know what I mean? And if I don't do it, like I might feel kind of okay, but not the same way that I would if I really took the time in to clean it and get into it.
Okay, so this has been so good. Just like, what word of hope are you giving someone this Friday, today, right now, who is saying, what can I do right now? Because I'm so anxious. And even if I'm anxious because my candidate's not going to win, I'm anxious because my candidate's gonna win and it doesn't look pretty after this. I'm anxious because the numbers keep going up on this pandemic and I don't know why. It's been so long. I'm anxious because my marriage is not well. I'm anxious because, I'm giving you a ton of scenarios and you might answer differently on each one, but what would you give? What's the kind of the going answer to share with someone?
Yeah, I think the thing that I would say is it's okay to be present to the fear. Listening to what our body is telling us doesn't mean that we agree or that we surrender to its power. One of the things that I really kind of struggle with is, I'm a 6 and I am an anxious person, and thank God for antidepressants, because if they weren't there, I would be a basket case. So that is like, I legit do that. And so I know personally what it's like to get lost in your head. And I know that for me, the journey of anxiety is so often trying to squash it. And while, yes, there are practices that you can do to control yourself, like the grounding, all of those things. Absolutely. Those are things that I would invite people to engage in when they feel that anxiety rising. But I had someone tell me once, there is, again, if I go back to our brains are geared towards survival, there's a reason that our bodies and our brains tell us this isn't safe. Right? Now, the truth of the matter is 9 times out of 10, it is safe, right? We are fine. And there is going to be something we can do to ground ourselves. But just having that, you're not safe, you're not safe, you're not safe, and not listening to it tells your body you're not trustworthy, right? And so what I've honestly tried to do the most when I feel anxiety rising is I try to look at it and say, thank you for trying to take care of me. Thank you for trying to protect me. I hear you, but I'm safe. Right? And it's the same thing to me. Like I have this mental picture of my internal anxiety is like that. It's that little toddler that's throwing the temper tantrum off in the corner because they didn't get what they wanted, right? 9 times out of 10, our instinct is just to let them cry it out, right? But honestly, what that kid is wanting is just to be acknowledged, right? And so a lot of times when you go over to that toddler and you're like, hey, baby, I know that hurt, or I know this is sad. Like, you don't necessarily give them the 6 cookies that they want, but you can say, I see that you want that, and I'm sorry, right? Like, it's the process of acknowledging. And so I think our anxiety spikes because we ignore it and we try to numb it.
Oh my gosh. So true. Oh.
So what is it like for us to look at it and say, what is this anxiety about? What are you trying to tell me? And then what decision do I need to make moving forward from that extra piece of information?
Yeah, and then that gratitude for yourself doing the work. And the work can just be, I am not okay.
Yeah. Honestly, Jarbo, I can tell you too, it can just be like, I had this one moment where I was full of anxiety, rushing, blah, blah. This is right before we went into shutdown. But I was running all around and I was crazy and I wanted this cup of coffee and I couldn't get the cup of coffee and I just was nuts going all over the place and I just felt so out of it. And I stopped in my kitchen and I said, it's okay for me to have a cup of coffee. Like, I literally said that out loud and I went to the coffee pot and I just looked at it and all these thoughts were still going and I just said, okay, but it's okay for me to have a cup of coffee. So I stopped and I made my cup of coffee. And I know that like that sounds so silly, but like for me, acknowledging like, yes, this is crazy and I don't have to just respond to it. Like I can hear you and I can see you and I can take control of it. Right? Like I can say, okay, I get I've got 900 things to do, but it's okay for me to have a cup of coffee. Right? Like I get that I'm super overwhelmed by what is going on in our country. And I get that this makes me really anxious. But it's okay for me to take a moment to step away from that. Like, it's okay for me to say, this is rooted in a care that I have for something. And maybe I'm scared. Maybe you know what I mean? Like, anger is a secondary emotion. I really kind of think anxiety a lot of times is a secondary emotion. And it's normally on top of fear or grief or loss or pain. You know what I mean? So when you look at it and say, ooh, I'm feeling anxious. Okay, I hear you. What else are you trying to tell me?
Yeah.
That opens up a whole new world of awareness and groundedness and soul care. I mean, it is soul care.
Woo, okay. Oh my gosh. We could talk oh my gosh, Amber. So good. Thank you for that. All right. I've got one more question to ask you before we move. This is so good. That's like immediate help for people. So thank you for saying those words. All right. So we always ask, I'll ask this before I ask our kind of rapid fire questions, is John Wesley. You heard of him before?
I think once or twice.
Yeah, maybe once or twice. Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Founder
maybe
of
in my religious studies degree. Maybe.
There it is. From a Methodist college. Right. John Wesley would not ask his fellow pastors just like, how you doing? He was famous for asking the question, how is it with your soul? And so a tradition here for every soul care guest is for me to ask the question just honestly and be as transparent as you want. How is your soul, Amber?
Yeah. So if I'm going to practice what I preach, I'm going to acknowledge that my soul is tired. My soul is weary. It's been weary for a while now, I think. And yet, I also think my soul is hopeful. It's very aware of the tiredness and and it's weird. It is weary. I actually kept this on my desk after you contacted me because I did this with a client. This was my version, but we did a little heart map.
Oh, cool.
And so like, it was like, what's in your heart? So, and I had like weary and tired were the first ones that I filled out. And I tried to give them like the biggest space in my heart because I was like, and like also I've got worried and fear and avoidant and concerned, right? Like these are all things that I feel like I carry on a daily basis.
People need to do that exercise.
Yeah.
I mean, how helpful is that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and what was fun about it is that I just like, so I'm doing this with like a 6-year-old girl. And I'm like, okay, well, I can either like model authenticity and put that down and help her learn what these feelings are, or I can pretend like they don't exist and we both lose. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think I would say if I'm 100% honest, it is weary. It is tired. And for better or for worse, there's still always that little part of my soul that is just, even if it's a little bitty bit, it's just like, and yet. So.
And yet. Oh man. There's a sermon about and yet somewhere in there. There's a sermon in what you just talked about. So thank you. Seriously, Amber. Good. And thank you for your transparency this whole time. It's been very refreshing. All right. You've moved to the final 11 questions. Rapid fire. And and just fire off answers as you go. Full disclosure, I have borrowed basically all of them from Brene Brown's Unlocking
Sweet, love it.
podcast. But you know what? Until Brene Brown gets on Soul Care, I'm going to
exactly. There you go. Hey, and Brene, if you're listening, this is your invitation.
Thank you.
But I want to be on it. I want to be on it too when she's there. Okay.
Yeah. I'm like, Brene, don't mind the 45 people that are also in the background here. Just like
we're good. Fine. Yeah. Okay. We're all just going to stare at you.
We're all just going to stare at you. Just.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Amber, are you ready?
I feel really anxious.
That's not the first question. That's not the first question.
Remember, I'm a 6 on the Enneagram, so now I'm like, okay. All right. Yes.
All right,
yes.
Here we go. All right. Fill in the blank. Mm-hmm. Ministry is
complicated.
You are called to be brave, but then you feel fear rising up within you. What's the first thing that you do?
Acknowledge it.
What's something people often get wrong about Amber Dent?
That she's always happy.
That's good. That's so good.
But she also doesn't know how to be quiet. She does very much know how to be quiet too. Just because I'm loud does not mean I don't know how to be quiet.
So good. All right. What's the last TV show you watched and binged and loved?
We watched, full disclosure, we watched the Avatar, The Last Airbender cartoon on Netflix that was on Nickelodeon like in the 90s. And oh my God, we loved it. We've watched it like 3 times. Once with our 7-year-old and twice with us as adults. So it's good.
Good. All right. Hey, what is your favorite movie?
Oh God, favorite movie. Honestly, You've Got Mail.
Okay.
I love that movie.
It is so good.
So good. Don't cry, Shop Girl. Don't
Shop
cry.
Girl.
It's so good.
You didn't realize Dave Chappelle is in that.
Oh, heck yes. He is. Yes.
Perfect timing. Okay.
Yeah.
What's a concert you've been to that you'll never forget?
Ooh. So there's a couple. But James Taylor would be one. But I think for the showmanship alone, it would be the Garth Brooks tour that he did recently when he came to Shreveport. That was a show. It had a spinning drum cage, and you're a drummer. I'm married to a drummer, and I'm a lights nerd in a show. And I was like, I was taking all these pictures of look at the lights, look at the soundboard, it just so on top of the music, that was awesome. So
are you sure you don't have a 7-wing in there with the look?
Oh no, it is hardcore 6-wing 7, hardcore, yeah.
What are you reading right now?
So I'm actually, I I need to pick up my book club book, which is a time trial. This is real bad. It's my month, and I suggested it, and I can't even remember the title of it right now. But that's what I will be starting to read. But I have been playing a lot of Animal Crossing. That's taken a lot of my reading time away.
Okay. I love that answer. Good job.
That's been my self-care. Books are hard. Not really. Please read.
What is on your bedside table right now?
Ooh. Full disclosure, some Reese's peanut butter cups.
Yep.
Trash things, a bunch of water bottles, not water bottles, water cups, and my diffuser.
Yeah. Essential oils. Excellent.
There you go. Basic white girl.
A snapshot of a moment in your life that brings you joy.
Okay, this is really easy because it's actually on my Facebook memory today. So my children's smile, it just does something to me. But there is this, or their laugh, my 7-year-old, he'll sit there and watch the stupidest YouTube videos and just cackle. And it's just I let it just wash over me. That's the best. But I have a video on Facebook that came up. It's one of the first videos I took of David, who is now 7. So he was 2 months old, and he's just giving me morning smiles. And I can't not watch it 600 times, and it just makes my soul happy.
Awesome. So good. Mm-hmm. What is something that you're deeply grateful for right now?
Ooh. I am deeply grateful for my tribe, for the people that long for justice and are willing to, can I cuss on this?
Yep.
Can I say sit in the shit with me? Because that 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 is what my weary soul needs. I don't need like a bunch of like platitudes. I need somebody to say this is hard and that's okay. And God, I'm so thankful for those people that are on my text chains that I can do that with. So my tribe.
So good.
Mm-hmm.
Last question. When our time here on earth is done.
Okay. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You gotta throw in a little deep question there. What do you hope God says to you when you reach heaven?
I hope that God says, you took the most faithful step every time that you could.
Good answer. Great answers across the board. Amber Dent, thank you so much, my dear friend, for taking.
Yeah. Thanks for asking me. This is great.
2020 has been full of crisis, and thank you for being a crisis care therapist. Thank you for caring for the least of these, those who need help, those in the system, and keep doing great work in Shreveport. And say hello to your family, and thanks again so much for your time.
I will.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Thank you so much for checking out Soul Care. Join us again next week at noon on Friday. Have a great weekend. Bye.